Alright guys, just want to do another video. I want to do this one on religion. It's the first time I've done a video on religion. Most of the ones I've done are on politics or movies or cars or something like that. I'm hoping this is going to be the first of many videos on religion, several topics. I don't want to make a longer video on everything I think about religion or God or anything like that. I think it'll just be like way too long if I did that. So for tonight's video, I just want to do a video on God's divine plan versus free will. And basically my belief is, and if you think about it and put a little bit of logic in, you'll realize that you cannot have both. You can't have a divine plan and free will. You cannot have both logically. You know, and well, the reason why you can't is because, you know, what's God going to do? Change His plan if you pray? You know, if you believe there's been a divine plan, you know, it's been in place, you know, to use George Carlin's analogy, for billions and billions of years, everything's going along fine, he thought it was great, so he put it into practice. And then you come along and pray for, I want a better job, I want, you know, I'm sick, so I want to feel better, I want that new car, I want this, I want that, and some, you know, will be a little bit less selfish. You know, hey, I'm praying for, you know, my mom, I'm praying for my dad, I'm praying for my boyfriend, my girlfriend, brother, sister, some, you know, people in a certain country after a natural disaster, whatever. You know, what if, you know, the thing that you're praying for is in the plan? But then, you know, what are you going to do if, you know, God doesn't answer you, saying it's, you know, not part of the plan? It's God's will that something didn't happen. You know, and you hear about many people who say, you know, it's God's will that something happened. You know, if something bad happens or something good happens, it's, oh well, it's just God's will. Or if, you know, if you present someone with a confounding topic, you know, why does this happen? Oh, I don't know, it's God's will. It's God's plan. And to me, people who say it's God's plan, will, whatever, who say something along those lines, it's their way of saying, I have no idea. It is. It's just their way. I have no idea. And so if I don't have any idea about something, it has to be God. You know, you see this in even, you know, our greatest scientists. You know, Isaac Newton said it, Ptolemy said it. You know, you can list a whole list of famous scientists from, you know, throughout history. They got to the edge of their knowledge and said, well, beyond my knowledge and our current understanding of the world has to be God. And, you know, decades or centuries later, someone else came along and said, well, I'm not really willing to accept that answer, so let me try and figure it out. And they do. And so, you know, God has to mean more to you than where science is yet to tread, to quote Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I don't get into a bit of a different topic here, but, you know, divine plan has to be something that you're willing to not pray about. You just have to say, oh well, no, I'm just going to leave it up to fate. Or if you don't want to call it fate, if you're religious, I'm going to say, I'm just going to leave it up to God's will, God's plan. Why pray? Doesn't matter if I pray. God has a plan for me. You know, I can pray that, you know, I want to be, you know, the first person to Mars. Yet if it's not in God's plan, no reason to pray for it. Okay, well, I'll go a step further and say, what's the point of praying in the first place? Period. You know, if you believe there's always been a divine plan that's been in place for billions and billions of years, and you come along and pray for something, you know, what's the point of praying? What's God going to do? Change his plan just for you? Seems a bit arrogant, don't you think? You know, I mean, what's the point of having a plan if God's just going to change it all the time just for you? You know, what if it was God's will to, God's plan for the tsunami to hit in the Indian Ocean back in 2004 when 240,000 people died? You know, what if it was God's will that, you know, Hurricane Katrina, you know, flooded 80% of New Orleans and killed 1,800 people, 1,900 people? What if it's God's will that 9/11 happened? You know, people aren't willing to say that it was God's will, you know, most of the time, in terms of when something bad happens, especially if it's a man-made disaster like 9/11. But what if it was? You know? And, you know, what's the point of praying if you know, he's going to change? What do you want God to do to change the plan? What's the point of having a plan? Like I said, you know, if you, to use a different analogy, if you're going to build a house or a building, you're going to have some sort of blueprints, you know, in order to build that house. You know, there's a master plan, if you will, to build that house. You know, why then have a plan then if every build crew ever is just going to come along and, well, I don't want to follow that plan, or I'm just going to say, you know what, we're just going to do our own thing. We're going to pray. We're going to ask you, Mr. Architect, Mr. General Contractor, if you can just do this or do that, or, you know, do all these things. You know, and, you know, part of the time he's going to say yes, part of the time he's going to say no. What's the point of having that plan if the plan, if that blueprint is, it can be changed all the time? You know, if everyone can pray and ask to the point where that blueprint can be changed to the point where it's no longer the plan anymore. Everyone's just doing what they want. And, you know, if God doesn't change his plan, if you will, if your prayers aren't answered, say, oh, well, you know, it's God answered, God's will. Unanswered prayer. Garth Brooks, years ago, 20 some odd years ago, wrote a great song, popular hit, called Unanswered Prayers. You know, what, you know, sometimes the best things are unanswered prayers. Well, no. You know, which sometimes, so I just want someone to explain the logic behind this. Sometimes God breaks his plan, and sometimes he doesn't. You know, again, I ask, what's the point of having a master divine plan? It's a divine plan. Why change the plan if it works? If God's all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful, all-omnipotent, he's supposed to know everything about everything. What's the point of changing his plan if you can just come around, if some know-nothing schmuck, you know, like me or you or anyone else, can pray and change the plan? It doesn't make sense. You know, you're either going to stick with the plan or you're not. You know, especially if God is all-powerful, all-knowing, all this, all that, all everything. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. Logically, it does not make any sense that God is just going to change his plan to suit your plan. You know, especially one that's supposedly all well thought out and everything else. You know, so I mean, I beg of someone to logically explain both. How can you have both a divine plan and free will? You know, I just don't see it. And I think if you ask any logical person to look into and to seriously think about it, you can't have it. It can't be done. You know, you either have a master plan, and that plan is going to be followed, or you're not. You know, I'm either going to follow the blueprint, because the architect probably knows what he's doing in designing his plan, designing that house, and having all the facts and figures and everything else. You know, same thing with God. If you believe that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-wise, all this, all that, and He has the perfect plan for you set out a long time ago, why pray and ask for it to be changed? Kind of arrogant on your part, isn't it? I think so. You know. Anyway, I'm just, you know, opening up the floor for discussion. You know, if anyone can logically explain, you know, how you can have both, I'm all ears. You know, I'm not saying you can't. I just find it logically illogical to have both divine plan and free will. Anyway, that's, you know, mine. I hope I portrayed it right, accurately. That makes sense for everyone to make that out there. I hope my idea makes sense. Anyway, I'm curious as to know what you guys think. Thanks, bye.